Okay, so in this video I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough of how the music for my cubes scene in Unity works. So I'm just going to briefly talk about how the PD patch works. I'm not going to get into too much detail on the PD side of things, as I could talk about that for a long time, but I just want to give you a basic overview of what's going on here. So if you've not seen the cube game, the basic idea is you've got 3 cubes, and as you move them around it's going to change the quality of, or it's going to change the properties of the music that you hear. So each cube represents a different instrument. We've got drums, chords and bass, and as each of them change they kind of affect each other and affect the music. So let's just talk first about how the drums work. I'll bring them up. So the drums work a bit differently compared to the chords and the bass. They're sample based, meaning that they're just audio recordings of kicks and snare hits. The bass and the chords are actually generated within pure data via synthesis. So if I go into the kick and the snare, you can see these audio samples are going to be played back whenever they're being toggled on. What these bars represent, or boxes represent, are 16th notes. So every 4 is 1 beat, so 4 of which makes up a bar of music. And as you can see, as each bar goes past, our drum pattern gets reset. This is just to provide a bit of variation and avoid repetition. So how this works is probability based. So let's have a look on there. Let's have a look into here. So the function is the same for the hi-hat, the snare and the kick. So we'll just look at one of them because it's a little bit complicated. So hopefully you can make out these columns. So I'll just sort of isolate one. What these represent is 1/16th note. So we've got 16 of them here, and that corresponds to our full bar. And if you look at this number, that's determining the probability of our beat being played. So in a kick drum, typically you're going to want the kick drum to hit on the first and the third beat of the bar. As we move this axis, so if we move in Unity, if we move the cube from left to right, it's going to change these factors. So if we put it all the way to the left, you're going to see a less complicated kick pattern happen. And all that's, or the way in which that's achieved is through this number. So even at like minimum complexity, we're still going to get a 99% chance of our kick being played on the first and the third beat here. As that moves up, the probabilities increase, and you kind of get a randomized variation of a kick pattern. And like I said before, this works the same for the snare and the hi-hat. It's much clearer in the hi-hat actually. If I put that all the way down, our hi-hat is pretty basic. All the way up is going to be playing pretty much all the time. So that's a way in which the drums can change dynamically. On its y-axis, it's going to change the tempo. So all the way down, it's going to be super slow. And as we creep up, it's going to speed up. So that's done. Their little beat manager that I've made here. So just to briefly explain what's going on in Unity. The position of the cube is being tracked in Unity. So the space in which your camera takes up is going to be the limit of where it can go, and that is represented in a number between -4 and -4 and 4. And on the x-axis, the x-axis, it's between -9.5 and 9.5. So I've taken our -4 or 4, and I've scaled it up to a number between 136 and 200, which is milliseconds. So that's going into our metro, which is going to be spitting out a bang, as it's called in PD, every 200 milliseconds. So as that goes down, it's going to spit them out faster. And you can see here it's going from 1 to 16, which is our 16th notes. So I hope that's clear. And we can move on to the bass next. So yeah, unlike the drums, the bass is actually being produced within, or the bass sound is being produced within PD. I don't want to get into it too much, but this is how it works. So the way it's played back, it works in 2 ways. So this is our bass cube. If it's all the way to the left, the timing in which a note's going to be played is based on our kick drum. So every time you hear a kick, there's going to be a bass note played. As this moves along, it's going to switch to 16th notes, so it's just going to arpeggiate. And we can go even further, move it all the way across, and it's going to go through the whole range of notes that we're talking about here. The way in which those notes are actually made up is based on the chords. So if we go into here, whenever a chord's being played, it's going to send that chord into here. It's going to unpack those chord notes, and I've added a couple more just to make the arpeggio a bit longer. Sorry, I should mention these numbers are MIDI note numbers, so they correspond to what would be like a MIDI keyboard. I've just done this personally because it makes visualizing each note a bit easier. The -24 is simply scaling that number down so it's within the bass range. So yeah, those are our chord notes. They're being split up, they're going to be packaged up, and they're going to be sent to our sequencer notes. So as our sequencer goes through the notes, it's going to play these notes, and you can see the chord notes update in real time as well. The y-axis of our bass, or our cube, sorry, is going to affect this sort of wah-wah effect. And we can see how that works in here. So that's what we're getting from Unity as it moves up and down. We're going to get a number between 0 and 1, and all that's doing is increasing the volume of our wah-wah effect here. Okay, and finally the chords. Some nice 80s synth chords going on. Again, these are the speed at which these play back are dependent on how fast the drums are going to go. So for the game, I wanted the ability to change key. So the way the chords are built is very similar to how they're built musically. So we've got a starting note, or a starting key, which is represented here in MIDI notes from A to G. That's going to be set into our scale builder, which builds up a scale. So we've got a root note, a +2 or a +1 represents a semitone or a whole tone musically. So this combination of tones and semitones is going to produce a major scale for us. That major scale is then sent to our chords, to our chord builder. As you can see here, that's our major scale, and that's the notes of our major scale right here. Each note has its own corresponding chord musically. So in the same way that a scale is built from our key note, a chord is built from our scale note. So we can go into our first chord, and it works for the exact same as our scale. So there's our chord being built up. It's then packaged up as chord 1, which plays whenever I hit this. can see the cards being played here. The way the cards are actually played back is through a sort of list function. I know it looks horrible, but let's just try and explain this as best as I can. So we can see these lists here. That is basically just a chord progression. So 1, 3, 2, 4 correspond to chord 1, 2, 3, 4. A 0 is a rest because we're dealing with 16th notes. We don't want any cards to play at this time, so it's just a rest, symbolized with a 0. So that this list is going to be sent to a little list append function, which is going to go through each of these numbers at the same speed as our drum notes, or 16th notes produced by the drums. And as you can see them you can see them go through here, and then you can see them being played here. So I can actually change which chords are being played by just pressing these. Apparently not. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what I did there was I've got two different chord banks. Again, this was to avoid repetition. So we've got two different sets of potential chord progressions. And the way this works, so here's our chord cube. As it goes from right to left, it's simply going to be choosing one of these lists. So we've got a list from 1 to 7, and we're getting our number from Unity coming through here, and so that's going to go through, it's going to select a chord list. Cool, so I mean that's pretty much it for all the instruments. A function of the Unity scene is, the purpose of the game really is to encourage people to move the cubes around. So to do that, I included like a goal position for each cube. This is all determined in PD. So without going into too much detail, these functions are going to randomly assign a position that cube needs to be in for the transition to happen. So if all the cubes are in their correct positions, which again is randomized, a transition is going to happen, and it sounds like this. So I'm just going to hit transition here. Sorry, that's out a bit. You get the idea. So what happened there was we got a little lead arpeggio, which works the exact same as the bass, but there's just more notes. So an arpeggio is built off of what chord we're on, and that just sort of helps the transition happen. Also at the end of a transition, a new key is selected as well, just to keep things mixed up. And at the same time, a new chord bank is switched. So it's constantly going to change as you transition. So that's about it. Obviously I could talk a lot more how it works on the PD side, so if you want to know more, then please don't be afraid to send me a message. But that's going to do it for this time. Cheers.